On this episode, we travel to Charlotte for the American Public Works Association Winter Maintenance Conference. Then we talk with an architect about walkable communities. A planner discusses the role of the private sector in making walkable places. Finally, we learn about accommodations for blind pedestrians in Charlotte. Stay tuned.
We're in Charlotte, North Carolina, talking with Mark DeVries, who's the American Public Works Association Winter Maintenance Chair. What's been going on here in Charlotte this week?
Well, we've had our national show, our National Winter Maintenance North American show. So it's North American APWA, American Public Works Association North American Winter Maintenance Conference. So we've got about 1,700 attendees that have spent the last 4 days in all kinds of various sessions, educational sessions, looking at exhibits on floor and attending some major workshops that we've held here at the conference here in Charlotte.
So what sort of things have people talking about in the workshops?
There's a variety of subjects. We actually cover anything that you can probably think of as far as winter maintenance goes. So we're talking about removal methods, we're talking about new alternatives, new equipment, new technologies, how we maintain our fleets, really a little bit about emergency management during winter storms, to all types of different weather things, and including all those different new multimodal methods that we're looking at as well.
Now, a lot of people think, well, a snowplow is a snowplow, but it's a little more complicated than that.
Well, a snowplow is a snowplow, and snow is snow anywhere you get it, right? But there's a little bit of difference between what we may get here in Charlotte or even south of here down to Atlanta compared to what we see in Alaska or up in Canada or even overseas. And at this conference, which brings people from all over North America and internationally as well, we cover all the subjects and all the differences that there are out there. And you look at the things that we have to clear, everything from somebody's steps to sidewalks to bike lanes and bike paths to major roadways to freeways. So there's different equipment and different methods based on all those different things. And we try to cover that, and we try to cover what levels of service we should be giving to those customers, because that changes as well.
You mentioned sidewalks, bike paths. Has the thinking about sidewalks been changing over the years? Is more attention being given to them?
Yeah, it starts with even, let's say, local ordinances. Are you required to do your sidewalk, or is it the city that's required to do the sidewalk? And we're looking more and more that we're all leaning to what's greener, what are better methods, more and more people using these type of methods, whether we're talking about walking, biking, segways. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are in there. And whose responsibility is it to provide that transportation, not just in nice warm weather, but anywhere and any kind of weather? So we have to start thinking differently perhaps than what we always have, because we have a responsibility to those people to plow that service as well. And it is changing for us. And it's a big difference when you've always thought about snow plows and 12-foot plows on the front and a big wing on the side, compared to how am I going to do this sidewalk, or how am I going to do this bike lane? And so we do need to do that, and we are working to that for sure.
On the one end, you have the equipment, maybe a sidewalk-sized plow instead of an interstate-sized plow. But do you have to look at the design of the sidewalk or the path as well?
Absolutely, and I think we look in some ways of how are those things. First off, how are they built, and how do they need to be maintained? And honestly, just like if we're looking at a mountain and we have to use different equipment there, what happens when a sidewalk is very steep or a hill? And then how is it made up, and what level of service does it need to be? And quite honestly, that makes a big difference for us. And how are we going to get to that level of service? Does it need to be just cleared and sanded? Does it need to be wet pavement? What kind of things do we do? And then we have to adjust to what kind of equipment. Is a snowblower good enough? Can we push it off just with a blade? Do we need to have a machine that will actually clear it, sand it, or salt it so that it can actually be a different level of service than depending upon who's using it and when. And I think some of that will vary of, is it a system here where, tomorrow the snow might be gone versus Minnesota where it's never going to leave. And it could be ice for the entire winter. We also have to look at the other things. Sidewalks and that are unique in the fact that a lot of times snow is pushed to the side, but they don't have very good drainage. So if we get a warm weather and it should melt, will it refreeze overnight? And suddenly that's an ice rink where perhaps that doesn't happen on the road because we've tapered the road and we have inlets and the water will go away.
So is this a subject that's going to be coming up in your future meetings?
Yeah, exactly. We've been talking more and more about how do we take a look at snow and snow removal in things that aren't just roads. So we're actually going to be looking at this as we get into our next APWA Congress, which is going to be held in Toronto in 2014. And we're going to be offering a subject. We're going to be offering a session on this and looking at multimodal and anything from something outside of just the road. So I think it's something that's really going to come in. We're going to be looking a little bit about how some of the new laws are going to affect where we have to do that snow removal, how do we do it, and some of the unique methods that are going on there. So we may be reaching out. We may be reaching out to universities. They deal with this every day. So we may be looking at people like that and seeing what they do and bringing some of that in so we can share it with Public Works as they face a lot of these new challenges that maybe weren't there not that long ago.
We're in Charlotte, North Carolina, talking with Tom Lowe, who's a planner and architect.
Hello.
So, what do you do professionally?
Well, I do a lot of urban planning, urban design work, and I do it all over the country, actually all over the world. And every now and then I do some around here. So it's been a lot of fun. Seen a lot of places and apply a lot of different ideas.
How have the ideas and concepts changed over all the years you've been in the profession?
Well, I think our principles have been pretty steady in terms of really focusing on walkable, compact communities. I would say the way they have changed is that the reception has become much more prevalent. There's a lot of momentum now. We reached a tipping point probably about a decade ago where people are embracing these ideas, not only just talking the talk, but walking the walk now, literally. And it's made a big difference in terms of being able to do things that we just weren't capable of doing maybe a decade ago.
Now, when you are trying to create a walkable place, what are some of the things you have to keep in mind? You can't just grab a book and say, "Here's the plan for a walkable place."
Right,
What are you looking for?
Well, one of the things you could think about is the ground plane that we experience as humans walking is probably the most important part of how we interact with our communities. And if you think about the way that we experience an urban place by walking down the street, it's generally the first story or two of the building. It's usually maybe a little bit of the foreground, the sidewalk that's in front of you, and what's happening on each side. And if you can get that piece of it right, not so much directly down below like the really most beautiful, expensive pavers in the world, but just basically a great street for the first story or two, and then what happens above it is less important. Even though the more you have, the more interesting it gets because you have a lot more energy. But if you can get that ground plane, all the details right, and create a great street, then you can create a wonderful community. And there are lots of little tools to the trade that we do, but if you can come up with, say, 6 simple rules, then maybe that's all you need. If you can get 90% there with 6 simple rules, then we're in great shape.
So when you have these tall signature buildings that form the skyline, from a pedestrian standpoint, we want to see what the bottom 10 feet looks like.
Exactly. Now, of course, having a beautiful skyline is part of what gives the city its reputation. I think we're here in Charlotte. We're looking at buildings. We're very proud of the skyline here. It's not New York. It's not Chicago, but it's fun to be able to point to it because we don't have a river. We don't have an ocean. We don't have that much topography here, so that's kind of our signature. But that first 10 feet on the ground, if you create a great streetscape along with this kind of very prominent high-rise city, then you have the best of all.
And you mentioned you're getting better reception when you talk about walkable places now. What's brought that change about? Is it just because you've worked hard all these decades, or or what's the shift in society that people are actually listening to people like you now?
Well, I think we are, everyone talks about the aging baby boomers and also the millennial kind of populations that are coming up, and how they've really kind of gotten over the idea of these autocentric, suburban communities as being kind of the American dream. The revised American dream is being connected, being in places where things are convenient, being able to interact with your friends. It's a whole quality of life movement. And so it's a matter of just basically designing the public realm that gives that the best chance of happening.
Do we need new standards, or can we do all this with what's already there?
No, we definitely need new standards. And I think a lot of the cities now, we're just kind of at the beginning of changing from this kind of suburban model zoning, land use segregated model zoning, to more of a walkable, mixed use, urbanism, form-based zoning. Cities like Miami and Denver are the early adopters, but you'll see most cities in the country probably over the next decade transforming their zoning ordinances to actually respond to this demand, which is really exciting. And they need people like me and a lot of my friends that know how to do it.
Is this a change that's just hitting the U.S. or what's going on in the rest of the world?
Well, we've actually been working in other countries. Some of the countries that have maybe a tradition of walkable communities that go back centuries, historic European places, they've maintained those areas well. They've also maybe made the mistake of embracing some of the mid to late 20th century models from America, the golf course suburban community. I think that they realize maybe now that wasn't a great idea. So they're kind of really looking back toward their historic centers, even more so. And so it's interesting how trends kind of affect places. The golf course community of the 1970s here in the U.S. In the 1990s and 2000s, went over to Europe and the Arab countries, and Asia. But I think they've realized that that's passé now, and so I think everybody's kind of getting in sync at the global level, especially because of environmental issues. And that's another interesting trend. A lot of things that we would have loved to have done a decade ago with our communities to make them more sustainable, more ecological, we just couldn't convince people to do. But today, it's such a prevalent, maybe even more dominant movement than walkable communities that we're able to really weave that together now. But that's another separate challenge. That's what I have been working on professionally for about the past 5, 6, 7 years, is how do you weave green infrastructure into walkable compact communities? Because sometimes people perceive green as spreading things out and pushing things apart. But what we talk about is how do you weave it in a very tight-knit way so that it's beautiful, it's green, but also very, very urban.
We're in Charlotte, North Carolina, talking with John Koch with Alta Planning and Design. What is Alta?
Alta is a small company that is focused on working with communities to make them more walkable and bikeable, from all aspects, from infrastructure to policy and programs.
What's the driving force in the Southeast behind trying to make things walkable and bikeable?
Well, one of the interesting things that we're seeing in some of the cities and towns that we're working in is, first, there's a big demand for more and better walking and biking facilities. But there's also been, especially in these lean economic times and politically difficult times for public sector funding, a lot of interesting partnerships and supporters for infrastructure and programs that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. And sometimes they are banks and power companies, railroads, big corporations that are trying to make their communities better places and more attractive. And we're seeing the advocates and the nonprofit groups and some of these private sector partners sometimes leading their municipal partners in the push for greater walkability and bikeability.
Now, how does that work? The city owns the streets and the sidewalks and the right of way. You have this private coalition saying, you want our community walkable.
Right.
That's
yeah. How does it work? It's interesting. Great example from Memphis where there's a community arts district that wanted to connect a park with a rail trail that was nearby and bring those bikers and walkers through the arts district and take advantage of the economic development. They had a great concept and a concept that is very workable. So the arts district and a local foundation put up the money to come up with a concept that would work with the community and that would work with engineering standards. Brought the city in to kind of bless it, and now the city is working on helping to find money to implement it. But the impetus for it came from the neighborhood and from a local foundation, and the city only came on board after the fact. And so sometimes it takes that private sector catalyst to help spark an idea, and then the city gets on board.
So you get something that gets started by the private sector, foundation, corporation, advocates. The city buys into it. Then does it then go through a process where it then belongs to the city, and I sort of think it was their idea the whole time, or?
Well, hopefully it does, and I think if for the places that are not interested in kind of who gets the credit, but I think all of these cities are very interested in kind of raising the capacity of their cities and also helping to make things happen that sometimes cities, because of funding constraints or staffing constraints, just can't make happen. And so I think the partnerships benefit the city and these private partners. But in some cases, the city begins to get recognition for these types of investments, and that positive recognition helps motivate them for additional ideas of the same kind.
And you have another place where the private sector would be involved. You have the street and the sidewalk that are public right of way, but then the adjacent buildings, here in downtown, all the storefronts would be private sector.
Right.
Is that another area where you have to have that private-public sector interaction?
Absolutely, and in many cases, there can be some skepticism between the business owners and property owners, but a lot of the analysis, and whether it's in New York City or now here in Charlotte, is showing that the economic return to the cities and to the businesses are very, very positive after the cities make investments in complete streets, walkability, bikeability, on the very corridors. The city of Charlotte's doing a study right now that shows that property values are actually up after they have made complete streets investments, and which means more tax revenue for the city, perhaps better investments for the property owners. New York City, Toronto, other places have done similar studies and found very positive results. So sometimes it's hard initially, but I think the evidence bears out that it's beneficial.
So what's the future of walkable places?
The future is demand. There's so much pent-up demand, whether it's from the millennials or aging boomers, that I think we can all stay very, very busy for the next decades, just retrofitting our communities to make them more walkable and bikeable, and following the leads of cities like the Charlottes and the Atlantas and the Memphises, who are making investments in their cities to make them better places to live and invest and walk and bike and enjoy life.
We're in Charlotte, North Carolina, talking with Laura Park Leach with the Metrolina Association for the Blind. What is the association?
We are a program that helps people who are visually impaired in Mecklenburg, Union, and Cabarrus counties. We go into their homes and do rehabilitation training. We also have a business that creates braille and large print for businesses.
And the city has obligations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, among other just good ethics, that to make the infrastructure accessible for people with disabilities. What goes into making the pedestrian realm accessible for a blind pedestrian?
I think the opportunities to know when you are at the corner is really critical. So part of the Americans with Disabilities Act is to make sure that there are detectable warnings that are on the ground at the corners. So our city has done a fantastic job installing those. In addition, getting across the street, knowing that the pedestrian signal has come on, and knowing that is the right time to cross, that can be, people can be assisted by having an accessible pedestrian signal installed. And our city has been wonderful about listening to the needs of people who are blind and visually impaired. And every single intersection that has an accessible pedestrian signal at it in Charlotte has been requested by a specific person who's blind or visually impaired. So they've been very responsive not only to the overall idea of accessible pedestrian signal, but specifically to that individual who's trying to maneuver around the city.
Now, what could other places learn from what Charlotte's been doing? Working with the disabled community about making things accessible.
I think for me, the thing that is best that is going on with Charlotte is their openness to the things that are needed by people who are disabled. They bring us in early in the design phase, which is good for everyone. When they're thinking about changing an intersection like the one behind us, this intersection is going to be changed in 2 years. They're in the design stage now, and they've already come to visit us, and I'm sure many other organizations that represent different disabilities. So they know how people are traveling, how they're going to use that intersection in the design stage. They save the city money, and in the end, they have a better product.
So they don't wait till they finish the plans and then try to get your okay on the finished product.
That's exactly right, yes.
And then you got a couple things here to demonstrate how blind pedestrians navigate. What's the story on the white cane?
This is a folding white cane, and this would be how someone would be able to tell if there's objects in front of them or level changes. So this goes into the whole process of walking down the sidewalk and coming to those detectable warnings that the city's put in, or they'll be using this as they're crossing the streets using the accessible pedestrian signal. We also here have just one type of GPS system. This is a Trekker Breeze. So as you're walking down the street or even in your car, it will announce the streets you're on. So this will help you know that you're getting closer to an intersection, that you're going in the direction you expect you're going, that you've turned a corner. If you're walking on the top of a T and you never notice that there's a street on the other side, it's actually going to announce that you've crossed that street. So your overall orientation is much better. You can set routes for yourself. You can ask it to take you back where you started when you turned it on that morning. There's so many opportunities to use a GPS now in a whole wide variety of ways, but it's very transformative to watch young children when they have a GPS and the things they know, as opposed to when I first started working in the field and all you had was your memory, your experience in that environment already. With a GPS, you're learning all the time incidental information that has not been available before. For instance, I took a young person in the car with the GPS on, and we were just going to the site where we were going to work, and all along he was hearing the streets named out as we were riding in the car, and he did not understand that streets were so close together. As he was riding along. So that was pretty exciting for me to see that the learning wasn't just going to take place when we arrived at our training point, but he was learning all along. Another example that happens with a GPS that's pretty exciting to me is, in the past, if somebody was going down the street, they would be using their awareness of how long have they been walking, and do they feel the sun on their cheek and things like that for navigation purposes, and maybe they'll feel the curve of the corner. But when you have a GPS in your hand, as you've rounded the corner and you go a few yards up, it actually announces that you're on a new street. So some of the guesswork that has been part of this in the past isn't that way anymore when you have a GPS. And that's what I like. There's a lot of safety and secureness and information. And I believe for people who are visually impaired, that's one of that's the critical part. They're missing information. And so when the city provides a detectable warning mat, when you have accessible pedestrian signals, when you have a GPS, you're getting information that other people are getting visually, and so that you're able to make those decisions better and continue to be part of the community.
So we've long had this difficulty of getting wayfinding information for the blind pedestrian, but GPS is good enough now that they have a way to get that.
Yes, it's really exciting to be able to walk down the street and hear the different intersections announced to you, and not just the names of the intersection, but how it's designed, so it can tell you if it's a three-way or a four-way, that if there's a different named street on one side than the other. You can also, at any point, push a button and say, this is a "Where am I" button. So it will name the closest house or building near you with the number of the house. So while it's not 100% accurate, you may be one house away, it gets you in the ballpark of the place you want to be, so that you will be able to use your own navigation skills from that point forward to find the exact location you're looking for.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.
Keep them out of the shop. But we've got 2 of those on each of our 3 yards.